So I've been looking for something like this to appear for quite a while. And those of you who've sort of, long-time members of this channel and, subscribed for quite a while will know that very, very often we have talked about on this channel the problems that people face up in the north. Our awful travel infrastructure, the lack of, social housing, the lack of investment. But the thing is, this just isn't just a problem in the north. It's a problem in the north because we've had a long period of Tory rule where nothing has really been done about this problem. So the problems that are already there have become even worse. And the thing is now, what happens down south? You'd have thought maybe the Tories would have focused on their traditional backyards, shall we say. But now we've got a load of Tory rebellions cropping up, which are essentially problems of their own making. All these rebellions, all these crises, this entire civil war that is been brewing for quite a while in the Tory party is only going to spill over into a civil war because the Tories have allowed it to. There has been no genuine leadership in the Tory party, at least as far as I can tell, really since Boris Johnson. And Theresa May tried her best to keep, the party in check, but she lost it. And I suppose you could add her to that list. But even David Cameron, who tried to sort of, keep a lid on it, maybe somewhat successfully, until, of course, the 2016 referendum. He had, his own problems. But now the party is just completely ungovernable. All different factions wanting everything each other. And now this is hitting them in their own backyards, their traditional heartlands. And Sunak has launched what he has called his Southern Comfort strategy to try and make sure that at least they do not lose the Tory heartlands, potentially to the Lib Dems and even Labour. So we're going to go through this piece because it is fascinating. Because normally we would be hearing about this that would be happening up into a town in the north. Today, we are hearing about this in a true blue Tory seat. So bear that in mind, how stunning this actually is. So before we go diving into this today, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a more traditional link called Buy Me Coffee, where you buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And on with this. So this comes from The Guardian, with the title of "The Tories are tearing themselves apart over housing, but this is another crisis of their own making." So, in the corner of Somerset, where I have lived for nearly 15 years, life in late Tory England grinds on. Our MP is David Warburton, a formerly Conservative backbencher who was recently found to have broken the Parliamentary Code of Conduct amid allegations of sexual harassment and drug use, which he denies. He has not been seen for 8 months. Our new Unitary County Council faces a financial black hole of over 38 million before it has even come into being, so cuts are being readied. The town's GP services are completely overstretched. Its bus services are a constant worry. Trains to Bristol and Bath run at inexplicit times of the day, and roads are regularly jammed with traffic. Use of the local food bank is an all-time high. Meanwhile, a lot of anger against is now focused on the ever-increasing number of new housing developments. A huge local story that reflects on one of the ever-growing number of internal conflicts eating away at Rishi Sunak's government. The Conservatives' 2019 manifesto promised that the government would trigger the building of over 30,000 new homes a year, which inevitably entailed a sizable loosening of the planning system. But the proposals for drastically changing the rules and introducing a new liberalised development zones were dropped after revolts led by Tory MPs, largely from the south of England. Now, sensing even more weakness at the top, Conservative rebels, led by the former minister Theresa Vills, now want to amend the new Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, among other changes that make Whitehall's housing targets advisory rather than mandatory, and get rid of a planning system's inbuilt prescription for future development to allow councils to ban building on the Greenbelt. The result has been an almighty row and panic at the top. The Conservatives being Conservatives, none of the controversy gets near the most urgent housing issue of all: the dire lack of homes for social rent and the pitiful numbers built every year. But that hardly diminishes the passions of the combatants. Today, the minister turned now sour senior backbencher, Sajid Javid, warned in the Sunday Times that Villas and her comrades wanted to tear down the existing planning system and lead their party into a, quote, colossal failure of political leadership. The Tory-aligned columnists in the very same newspaper recently described the rebels' moves as a wicked quest to enshrine a NIMBYism as the governing principle of British society. Given that their ranks include such panto villains as Chris Grayling, Ian Duncan Smith, and John Redwood, most of the bystanders on the political left would presumably be inclined to agree. But this issue is complex and confounding, and to somewhat two contradictory things are both true. Yes, the anti development Tories' moves might be cynical and self serving, but at the same time, some of the widespread unease that they are seizing on is real and understandable. If you live and work in a city, imagine the opponents of a new development to be a bigoted, to be a, yeah, to be a bigoted shower of endlessly shouting NIMBY at them is easy. But take a closer look at what is actually happening across the country, and you might come to a more nuanced opinion. For a start, objecting to concreting over huge chunks of the countryside and obliterating natural habitats is surely not inherently an evil case. The fact that most new housing tends to lock a dependency on the car only compounds many of the people's unease about what new developments mean for their environment. The complex and opaque machinations of landowners and private developers only increase the sense of them being dissent intensifies with every little sense of what people to places hold dear, because profit is usually the deciding consideration, and far too many new built projects are cheaply constructed, lack community amenities, and are out of step with an aging population of increasing numbers of people who live alone. And one massive tension now sits at the heart of local government about housing: the plain fact that after 12 years of cuts, new development threats to deepen the problems of the places whose services and infrastructure are now in a state of decay. Damien Green, the former minister and MP for Ashford, Kent, is one of the Tory rebels who said much of the opposition to the particular developments, he recently wrote, is being based on the proposition that there are not enough school places or medical services or even water to cope with the rising population or locality. So think about that. There are just not enough services: transport, school places, medical services. Why? Because the Tories have not invested in infrastructure. Infrastructure is key. And it's not just, roads that we think of as infrastructure, but it is school places, it is medical places, it is GP practice stations, hospitals. There is a lot of stuff that we really need to think about when we talk about, infrastructure just beyond, transport capacity and capabilities of people being able to get to one point or another. Local transport is a massive issue, especially up here in and around sort of, where I am. And this now seems to be spreading around quite a bit. So, so it's based on economic services or even water to cope population. So this is undoubtedly true. And in a sense, whether they actually realize it or not, Green and his allies are actually really decrying their own party's time in power and failures made of any sensible conversation about new housing, all but impossible, for one obvious reason. If a country does not maintain the stuff that keeps it running, then any visible future becomes impossible. So back to where I live. From a population of 28,000, it has a dysfunctional housing market characterized by often impossible prices and rising rents. Most of the new developments are scattered over a local area, have done very little to ease these problems. The price of a new built 4-bedroom house regularly scrapes about £500,000, and those have worsened the tension between any expanding town and an ever dominated by cars and an increasing threadbare social fabric. And last Thursday, I went to a packed out meeting organized by our town council to discuss the huge garden community of over 170,000 homes, housing about 7,000 people to be built on fields beyond the edge of town that may see people in the areas, many people see as the area's green lung. And on the face of it, these plans are better than the norm, promising a new primary school, a community hub, and properties for social rent and playing fields and more. But as people have repeatedly pointed out in their speeches and questions, these visions are at work of a so-called promoter, a company that works with landowners to get the initial planning permission for the land and thereby hugely increase its value in return for a share of the profits once it's sold to the highest bidding developer. In other words, people we're hearing, people we heard laying out their seemingly benign plans are not the people who will actually do the building. And they squared to try to square the lofty promises with real world economics. And in a town over 8 miles away, viability has meant the profitability affordable share of a big housing project going from 30 to around 10%. As well as fears of yet more traffic and air pollution, one objection came up time again. How a quote whole new town would cause a wider public realm to buckle under the strain. To quote one eloquent statement of opposition, they said this: the services and infrastructure are already overstretched. Who will fund what is needed? Not the promoter or the landowners, and not the local authority, given its present economic outlook. Here, once again, is a very familiar picture of Britain as belabeled like mess, in which it is far too little is ever integrated or joined up. Councils are also starved of money that they can't function. The fact that housing is inseparable from transport, healthcare, and all the rest is repeatedly forgotten. And amid the chaos, Conservative politicians turn on each other as their endless failures become clearer and clearer. So I'm really happy, honestly, that this piece came up and was used in the Guardian, because you do not hear very often about towns like this in the Tory heartland. So I'm really, really happy to see a piece like this, because it just goes to show you we may have it really bad up in the north, but down south, even places controlled by Conservatives, the fact that they are rebelling and almost criticizing their own very years of being in charge. It's their own fault. And now you can't even have a sensible conversation, it looks like, in the Tory party to have this. And remember, just a few days ago, there was a piece written that we talked about in Conservative Home, coming to the shocking realization that, hey, if we don't build homes for young people to get on the property ladder, then why would they ever vote Conservative? And this very idea was treated as if it was some sort of alien that had just landed from the planet Mars. And people were like, oh my God, an alien has landed. That's how shocking this idea seemed to be to the system. But the Tory party continues to shred itself to pieces. And this is a massive opportunity for Labour. And not only just Labour, but the Liberal Democrats. Because if the Lib Dems can really seize on this, and it does look like they are potentially ready to seize on that, they could take a lot of seats in the next election. There is a potential they could really make a comeback in the next election. And it would be in these predominantly Tory areas. So if the Lib Dems can have a coherent plan and really sort out the mess down in these towns, then they are potentially cementing a brand new position down in the South where they can knock the Tories out even more. So yeah, this is certainly one to keep an eye on. But to hear stories like this from places down south is incredibly rare. Incredibly rare. But I'm really glad and to bring this to you because now you're getting to see a wider picture and just how deeply inbuilt this chaos really is in the Tory party and is certainly now one of their own making. So as always, guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.